Whether your beer is in a bottle, can, or glass, kick back and relax. It's better on draft.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 294 of the Better on Draft podcast. My name is Ken. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. We have a little bit of a different show going for you today. As I'm getting the cameras ready to go, let's go over with the host, see what everybody is drinking real quick, starting with Robert. Robert, what do you got?
I have got myself a bottle of Bell's Kalamazoo Stout.
Very good pull. Nick, what about you?
Good evening, everyone. I'm drinking a Goose Island 312.
Goose Island 312. Dan?
Going hard today. Sorry, I got to break it up. I got a Stoli and on the rocks, actually, no soda.
Oh, just straight vodka. You had a day.
No, not at all. Just I didn't have any soda to add to it. That's what it came down to.
For myself, I am pulling a Nick just to get things done. I've got a Sam Adams Cherry Wheat. Been a minute. And I also got a Sam Adams Boston Lager. With us on the live studio, we have our friends over at the Beer Guys Radio. Why don't you guys introduce yourself? Tell us your names. We'll start with Brian and what you guys do, and give us a little bit of a history on Beer Guys Radio.
Well, I am Brian Hewitt. I am a co-host of Beer Guys Radio. I before that was doing the news and still do the news, so kind of news heavy and do a lot of talking. And I'm drinking an Anchor Steam beer. I don't know if it's going to come through on the camera because it wants to blur it out, but trust me, it's an Anchor Steam beer with the new branding. I'll let Tim take it from there. He's got he's the historian.
411 radio history here. Yeah. So Tim Dennis, I'm one of the founders and a current co-host of Beer Guys Radio. And I didn't know straight vodka is how we were rolling here. I may have went a little different, So, but what I do have is I've got me a big, nice tall can of barrel aged 1050 right here that I've just cracked.
Good choice.
I figured that was a good way to start things. So Beer Guys Radio, much like you guys, we're a show all about the love of craft beer. We like letting people know about new breweries. We like to spread the word and just talk to cool people and drink good beer. We are syndicated, radio syndication. We've got about 50 stations across the U.S. and in Guam, actually. So also launched our show as a podcast. We launched in January 2016. And we just cover everything from the actual beers to the breweries, brewers, science, technology, business end of craft beer.
And where are you guys based out of?
We're Marietta, Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia area.
Do you guys focus a lot on Georgia breweries? Are you nationwide, international? Do you have a focus at all?
So we started our show to be a local show. We actually launched as just a show on a local radio station to cover Georgia beer. There was a station over in Huntsville, Alabama. The program director heard our show as he was in Atlanta and called and said he wanted on his station there. So we kind of expanded to cover Georgia and Alabama. We started getting more requests from people listening to the podcast outside of our area to cover breweries just outside of Georgia and Alabama beer. And we initially launched a secondary podcast to cover kind of the non-local beer. But we kept growing with our affiliate stations where we've got 3 stations in Illinois. We've got, I think, 3 now in California, right, Brian? We just got another
California. One. Yeah, I think it's 3.
Our number one station outside of Georgia is up in Burlington, Vermont. So not a bad place to be as far as craft beer goes. So now we have the one show, Beer Guys Radio. We cover beer worldwide, really. The bulk of our listeners are U.S. based, but we have a fairly decent number of people in Europe and really around the world, little pockets here and there.
Wow. That's a lot. What are some of your, do you remember what your first interview was?
Our first interview was
for the show.
Creature Comforts Brew. Actually, our first one, we did an episode 0 pre-launch with Clown Shoes. And our first actual interview was with Creature Comforts Brewing. out of good old Athens, Georgia here. And Creature Comforts, if you're not familiar with them, they were really a turning point for Georgia beer. They came out with Tropicalia IPA that kind of brought that, tropical and a little less bitter beer to Georgia, and really raised the bar here. And I mean that as no dig whatsoever to our brewers that were existing at the time, but it kind of took things to a new level. But we had them on, and also had a fellow named John Sherry, who at the time was a home brewer, but just over a year ago now opened his brewery, Little Cottage Brewing, and he makes some big stouts and that. So that was episode 1.
So when I started as the co-host, I think Von Trapp was the first one we talked to when I was full co-host. Prior to that, I was just doing news. So that was fun. I like those guys. I think about them every now and then. I'd like to get back up there. But yeah.
I believe you stepped in, Brian, when we interviewed Bruce Watson of Foreigner. Was your first interview.
You know what? You're right. You're right, because Aaron couldn't do that. So that was the first one. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Von Trapp, for those of you who've never been there, up in Stowe, Vermont, I think they might have a few different breweries themselves, but it's such an amazing and beautiful brewery. If you've never been up there, we actually stopped by there on the way out of town because we stopped in there, went to the Alchemist, of course. You have to go to the Alchemist when you're in Stowe. Gorgeous area, gorgeous place. So I was excited to go. But let's talk about these beers real quick that we're all drinking, because when we wanted to do the show, we wanted to bring up these not old beers like, a 2012 beer or something like that, but we wanted to bring beers that we remember from when we first started drinking craft beer. The beers that almost are forgotten because there are 8,000 milkshake IPAs and your hard seltzers and RTDs. So let's go around and kind of talk about the beers real quick that we're all drinking. I'm going to start with Rob. Rob, what was the beer that you had once again?
So the beer that I have is the Bell's Kalamazoo Stout. And, when it came to craft beer, when I first started drinking, of course, as what I think with a lot of people, when they start with drinking craft beer, that their craft beer journey starts with a mistake. And my mistake was drinking a Molson Ice for my first beer ever. And that quickly got fixed with having, unfortunately, I could not find it because I feel like being in Northwest Detroit, I am in a bit of a craft beer desert with the stores that are in my area. So nobody had any Dragon Stout, which was the first craft stout that I had. That was absolutely amazing. And then just kind of went on to drinking Bell's and having the oatmeal stout and the Kalamazoo Stout. And that's pretty much, like I said, is just what I have. And just it kind of brings it back to what it was like when I first started drinking stouts, and just kind of remembering the flavors and everything. And I'm looking at the bottle right now and saying that the stout is brewed with brewer's licorice. And other than Twizzlers, I hate licorice. I hate black licorice. I cannot stand the taste of it on its own, but it works in this beer so damn well. And it's definitely one that I will just every once in a while will go back to. Though my favorite Bell Stout, I think, will always be the Cherry Stout. So that one, kind of growing up with into the craft beer scene, that was one of my favorites. But Kalamazoo Stout still hits pretty damn well.
Now, Brian, you actually got not Brian, excuse me, Tim. Tim, you have a stout that you brought onto the show, that 1050. I always remember Oscar Blues as one of the very first breweries, Dale's Pale. As obviously that's just such a memorable brand. Was 1050 like an introduction to you into Imperial Stouts, or is this just kind of what was on the shelf for you?
So this was one of the early ones, and my first beer in craft beer, when I became of legal drinking age, I lived in Northeast Arkansas, and craft beer really did not exist in that time back in the 1700s when I was 21 years old. So, we had to look around and see what we could get. But I did a workshop with my job where we had some of our coworkers from Europe, Italy, England, come over, and we did a celebratory dinner, and they ordered a Sam Adams and just made a comment. They're like, well, at least they've got Sam Adams here. And I asked them what they meant by that, because at the time I was perfectly happy with my Bud Lights because that's what I knew. So they explained to me a little bit about why Sam Adams was a little different. I tried one, so much more flavor, robust, and that was really what started my journey on craft beer. I think probably a lot of people, good old Sammy Boston Lager may have been the first one, but 1050 was one of the earlier ones. KBS, I think, was one of the first hype beers that I chased. One of the guys driving around to watch the distributor trucks, which store they're going to, so I can buy my one bottle allotment there of KBS. So, and I think that as we've seen a lot more, there's just so much more beer than there was when KBS and 1050 kind of ruled the roost there. So not that it's not a good beer and people still don't still talk about it, but I just don't think it gets as much hyper recognition as it once did.
Well, you mentioned Sam Adams, which is actually what I'm currently drinking. And I tell you what, it's probably been easily over a decade since I've had a Sam Adams cherry wheat. This was always a draft beer option at a local B-dubs. Like, if you went to B-dubs, there wasn't that much craft beer options. But if you went to any B-dubs, at least in Michigan, Buffalo Wild Wings, for those who don't know, your options were always on draft Boston Lager, cherry wheat. And that was really it for not American adjunct lagers. Way before they got all the craft taps and the local taps. Your options were Sam Adams. You might have had something a little bit bigger. So I am really excited to be retrying this again, just because it tastes like such a very sweet wheat beer that, I feel like I don't give the opportunity to drink anymore. I'm too busy chasing the maltier, biscuity flavor beers. But Brian, on the other hand, you went complete other end of the spectrum with a steam beer with Anchor Steam. Now that we see the logo on it now.
Did it come through this time?
It's coming through right now. Yeah, if you're listening to the podcast over on Spotify or iTunes, head on over to our YouTube page. And of course, if you're on our YouTube page, go check out our podcast by Spotify, iTunes. Go subscribe, follow. But a steam beer is definitely not your standard beer. Even in today's world, unless you're going to like Live Oak for a smoked beer, smoked beers, steam beers, these other really one-off styles that not too many people are doing, nobody's really chasing. So was a steam beer, was that your introduction into craft beer, or a introduction into craft beer, or is it just one you remember from when you first started?
It's an early option and kind of a nostalgic favorite of mine. It's not one I drank a lot of. My next beer, I just finished this. My next beer is actually going to be one I started off with, Black Beet Porter from Deschutes. But I was warming up. This was more of a pregame deal, the Anchor Steam. But there's so much history involved in it. There's so many firsts that Anchor Brewing they pioneered so much stuff. This was the first. I think this is credited as being the first American craft beer. It came out in 1971. I pulled up some old notes from an old show about it. 1971 is when this came out, and it wasn't pop. It wasn't like a very well known style then, and it's still not that popular of a style now. So they may still be ahead of their time, even having made the beer so long ago. But a regular option. The Black Beet Porter was one of the things that I grew up in Portland, Oregon, or hit drinking age in Portland, Oregon anyway. And when we went out to pizza joints or wherever we went, Black Beet Porter was always on the menu. So that's just what we drank. So we just in this last show, we were talking about it. We were drinking Black Beet Porter. And then at some point we made the shift. Maybe we decided to go a little lighter. We went to Mirror Pond, which is another great great offering from Deschutes, but a good pale ale. It's not quite as heavy as Black Beet Porter, but Black Beet Porter isn't that heavy compared to the options you're going with today. So I like both of these a lot. There's a lot of nostalgia behind both, and that's why I picked these ones up.
I feel wherever you are at the given time that you turn 21 is really what's going to kind of define a lot of your craft beer beginnings. For us here in Michigan, we were in the, Bells and Founders territory. Therefore, that's usually what we drank, with Goose Island kind of trailing a little bit more, and Great Lakes coming in, from the corners. But speaking of Goose Island, Nick, you've got that 312. You and I have known each other since before we were 21, so obviously we've been drinking together since then.
Oh, yeah.
But was 312 one of your go-tos when you were just starting to get into craft beer, or is it just one you remember?
I think it's one that I remember. So the first actual alcoholic drink that I had was Smirnoff Triple Black when I was 16. Dan's laughing. Ken's smirking over there. Ha ha, funny. First beer was actually Labatt Blue, and I think that was my thing for a little while. But I think when I think of something that was outside of the box, the first one that really came to mind, even though it might not necessarily be craft per se, was 312. I remember getting this at Hazel Park Racetrack all the time because it was either Bud Light, Labatt, Miller Lite, and then 312. And when I was going to bet on the ponies that night, I was drinking 312. The horse racetrack is now since closed. But since then, many other beers I've come across. But 312 is just something that I've always been able to go to when I don't want something big and bold, like that 1050 that Tim has right now. But not to say there's nothing wrong with it, but
the session beer.
Yeah, there you go.
Right.
Session beer.
Yes, it is.
It is.
I'm
Absolutely.
actually a little jealous of it right now.
Yeah. So, but the 312 is always something that I've always remembered. And anytime I see it and I want something like sessionable light, this is going to be the go-to for that.
Now,
And I don't think very many places carry it anymore. I sure don't see it as much as it used to anymore.
well, I think the production of Oberon has gotten a lot bigger since then. And I think a lot of us here in Michigan prefer Oberon as our wheat beer of choice. Dan, obviously, there's nothing for me to segue into what you're drinking since you've got Stoli. But as I've been drinking along with Nick since I turned 21, I was the one that kind of really introduced you into craft beer. Since you really weren't drinking it prior to me always having it around. What is your earliest memory of like craft beer? Either before I held your hand into getting into it, or, what was the first memory you might have with me kind of shepherding you into craft beer?
So first craft beer, I know people say it's not, actually going back a little before your time, Ken, back to the late 90s. One of the very first beers I legally had was our go-to favorite for the Newcastle Brown. Drinking that both in Canada and over at, if you guys remember when St. Andrews Hall still existed before the floor started to collapse.
It's still there.
I'm going to
can you go in there? That's the thing.
I'm going to a show on Saturday at St. Andrews. So.
I'm glad to hear they fixed it up. That's my very first, if you want to call it craft beer. I know most people disagree on it. After that was Sierra Nevada Pale, which I had drank off and on along with Sam Adams Boston Lager and then the cherry wheat you were drinking. There was a place exactly like you talked about. You go in there, it's the Bud Light, Coors Light, Miller Light, all of that. And then they would have either Boston Lager or cherry wheat, going back to the old Pistons games back out at the Palace before it would start. Those are the earliest memories. And then I kind of drifted away from it because you'll remember I went through that whole malt liquor phase for a while. And then the reintroduction, if you remember, was a Bell's Two Hearted that you gave to me. I forget where we were, what we were doing, but you're like, oh, look, they have this here, and handed me the Two Hearted, I believe. I was like, oh, yeah, this is pretty good. And it just kind of kicked off from there.
I'll always remember it because it was $2 Eucalypts, and I would have to drink a Two Hearted, and then you would buy 2 bottles of Bell's Amber.
Yeah.
So yeah, $2 Eucalypts over at Luna was for sure. But you bring up a valid point, which is where I'm going to bring back in the Beer Guys Radio over here to chat. And you could kind of discuss between the two how you want to answer this first. If not, we'll just have Tim go first. But what does the term craft beer mean to you? Does it mean anything anymore in 2022?
So it does to me, and I know officially the definition keeps changing. I think the Brewers Association has that part written in pencil just for quick changes there. But to me, a craft brewer is a small brewer, independent. They care about their ingredients. They really care about their product. It's not they're not focused on how much volume can we crank out there, that they want to make the best product possible. It's just overall, I think there's an attitude to it. And this may be a controversial statement that I'm about to say here, but here in Georgia, of course, we have Terrapin that's sold to Miller. Terrapin has a tap room at Truist Park, there, the Braves Stadium. It's a little brew pub with guys who absolutely love their beer. and care about it. I know by definition not a craft brewery, but I would consider the Terrapin Tap Room there because of the people that are behind the beer, the care they put into those pilot batches that they brew. I don't have any qualms with drinking that beer. I don't really have qualms with drinking any. I choose to go for craft over big beer. But I know those guys support them, but it's really about the attitude and how much you care about the beer over just being a production.
Before Brian enters, in your mind, has the definition changed at all for you? Have you always felt that way? Did you get to, I think we've all been a little snobby in one time of our lives, but did it, oh my God, they sold out, I'm never going to drink them again, until you realize, all the work that they actually still put into it.
Sure.
They're not, turning a blind eye to the quality. Has that definition changed for you since maybe when you first started drinking craft beer?
It has. I mean, when I started in this, I was told what craft was, and I'm like, okay, this is craft because I'm told this is craft. And I originally moved to Atlanta in '98, and we just had a brew pub open here, Max Lager. Shout out to them. Good friends with the owner now. But I remember going in there and drinking their IPA, which I think they still make to this day. And I told my buddy that I was with, I was like, this tastes like someone poured a Bud Light through a bag of lawnmower grass. That was my opinion of IPAs at that time. As I learned more, I got on the bandwagon of this brewery's a sellout. They're big beer, and then I talked to the guys at Ballast Point. I talked to the guys at Terrapin Beer Company. I talked to the guys at Karbach, and Spike from Terrapin. We know Spike, and he explained to us, what this means, what he's able to do with the brewery, what he's able to do for his employees, what he's able to do for his community. Would still be my preference to see breweries that didn't sell out to the BMC brewers, the big Bud Miller cores. But I understand everyone makes their own decisions based on whatever's in it. Spike stayed with Terrapin and stayed on. John, the other owner, went and found a little bitty place near Asheville. They took different paths in that. But, I was the snob that don't support them. They're sellouts. Talk to some people who did it, why they did it. I still try to avoid those. I want to support my local brewers, not just and I say my local brewers because we're a nationwide show. I'll support everybody that's, small and passionate about beer. I don't turn down a beer that may be a craft brewery that was purchased. I just don't make an effort to search out those beers.
Did you want me to jump in here?
What about you, Ryan?
Okay. I wasn't sure where we're going. I think necessarily if you've been around drinking as long as Tim and I have been, and Tim's been around even longer than me drinking.
I have. This is true.
You necessarily have to change your opinions about things to reflect the realities of the world. You get to know people that are still doing exactly what they did before under new ownership, and they don't care any less about the product, and you still care about them and them doing well. Yeah, you have to support that. I definitely to kind of say what Tim said very briefly, quality over quantity. I want them to be fussy about the end result and not care as much about how much comes out. I understand that frequently means it will cost more, but I think the quality usually makes it worth the extra cost. I got to throw it back to the mention of malt liquor earlier. What we really need here is some good craft malt liquor. Somebody who cares about malt liquor and can make it well. We need some more DKML out there in this world. That's what we need right now.
We've had a few. There was one that Rochester Mills did one. Old Nation. Travis, please bring back the German Hobo. That was an amazing malt liquor. So Travis, if you're listening, get off of your podcast and listen to this one and bring the German Hobo back.
That sounds like a beer that was made for me to drink.
Yeah, if you guys do a malt liquor show, invite me back, please, because I got plenty to say on that topic. That's for sure.
We're almost 260 episodes away after our malt liquor show, because we obviously did malt liquor for the 40th episode for sure.
Oh, see, why didn't we think of that? Oh my gosh.
We do need to do a malt liquor show. And the crazy thing is, in the news, it just reported this week that people are very split. The growth in beer right now is non-alcoholic and super high gravity. Everything in between is shrinking. People want either nothing at all or they want all the alcohol there is. And so this is a perfect time for people to get onto craft malt liquor.
I mean, it's a perfect time, but at the same time, it kind of makes me feel like there's so many craft breweries out there that I don't want to say like their bread and butter is everything between 4 to 6%, but with the craft beer drinkers that are out there, that it always feels like, at least for me, whenever people are walking into a craft brewery, that they want to have something light. They don't want to go off and grab a 10%er, especially when they're walking into a brewery and they find that a 10%er is going to cost them $11. I guess if they're buying it off the shelf, and there's that price point that they expect for it to be that high of an ABV, I guess I'm okay with that. But I feel like when you're going into a brewery, like I don't see, especially right now in this heat, that there are a lot of breweries that are out there that are selling that high ABV. Like, one of the breweries that I host trivia at, Eastern Market Brewing Company, they have one stout that's on, which I still can't figure out why this beer is still on tap, because I figured it would have kicked by now. But they have a barrel aged, what they call it's called the Abolitionist, which is a beer that they brewed 2 years ago and has been just sitting in barrels. And they released it during their Juneteenth celebration. And this thing kicks at just over 10%. And it's not selling. I mean, it was selling during the party, but we're almost 3 months later and it's still on. So it's really weird to kind of look at it, and doesn't really feel like to me that, at least from that perspective, that it's selling.
Yeah, I wouldn't have expected it either, other than I just saw the reports about it. That's what the numbers are showing. I'm like, I assume this is people buying stuff like the big stouts, taking them home or taking them to bottle shares, opening them up with their friends, and all getting their 2 or 3 ounce pours off of the bottle. I mean, I think there's still a fair amount of people who do that. I really enjoy a big stout, and I'm not afraid to pay the price for it, both to buy it and the day after. But I mean,
Well, we got Orpheus here in Atlanta having their anniversary in June, releasing half a dozen barrel-aged stouts and half a dozen barley wines.
In 90-degree heat on blacktop. Yeah, it's great.
Don't say barley wine around me, man. Oh man, that's my style right there.
That's it.
But I would say that with the bigger styles, and Ken, Dad, Nick, you guys know we did an episode in studio with Roke having a bottle of the brewery's Black Tuesday that clocked in at 20.5. I mean, it was a damn good beer. But yeah, we definitely paid our fair share of taxes on that when we were done.
Oh yeah.
Well worth the price.
Let's actually chat about that real quick, because when we think of a lot of big beers, we think about, and it looks like if you look really hard into the video behind Tim, he's got one of them Sam Adams Utopias sitting right on his shelf over there.
He does.
He also was the one that mentioned truck chasing, going after that KBS a while ago. Does anybody still, for us, we're in Michigan, we're at over 400 breweries. Obviously, Georgia, you guys are expanding as well. Do you guys at all chase trucks still? Are you looking for that white whale that still has gotten away? No, Tim.
I haven't. Not in a long time, man. So
the era of the white whale is, I won't say over, but I'm beyond it. And I think it is close to being over.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned Black Tuesday, and we used to get on every year and try and get our orders in. And, talking about beers there, this year's Black Tuesday release, for several days after, they're saying, there's a few more left, get them. I remember a time when 30 seconds after the website went live, they were gone, So, and I don't think I've bought them in 2 or 3 years now, just because I can go out to my local brewery, and if not my local brewery, to my local package shop and get many beers that are very, very close, other than the ABV because of our cap here in Georgia. But the quality that's available to me is different than it was even 6 years ago.
Do you have a cap on import or making?
Just what can be on the shelf here. 14% is our cap. They
across the board.
A few years ago, a like 14.1 or 14.2% Bourbon County slid through, or DKML. They pulled it from shelves.
They pulled it, but it made it into the state briefly.
It actually got released, and they're like, oops, we messed up, and they pulled it off the shelf. But fortunately, we know people, so we got a couple.
I actually remember this story. We've talked about it on the show, how it came on, went on the shelf, and then like a day or two later, somebody realized, oh crap, this isn't following. Is that inclusive of your breweries too? Like if you went to a tap house, can they make a higher than 14% ABV beer, or is that
they cannot?
Okay.
Across the board, and that was until 2006 or 2008. Our cap was 6%. So,
oh geez,
yes. Wow. So until then, we were capped at 6%, and they got that raised to the 14. But whether it's production, serving, or sales, whether that's from the state or one that's brought in through distribution, they can't hit 14%. Fortunately, we have a lot of really talented brewers that can brew exactly at 13.999% on a lot of their beers. So that's nice.
Just nailing it. And I got to say that a lot of, even if they are exactly 14%, man, I don't know if I need the extra percentages beyond that. The biggest annoyance about the cap, is it keeps beers that are slightly over it from making it into the state. Some of the incredible Avery offerings, and obviously Black Tuesday could never make it in here. And it's annoying to not have that option. And yet we've got a fantastic bourbon selection. I can go get barrel proof stuff, 100 and 105% bourbon out there. And yeah, that's completely fine. But oh, God forbid our beer goes above 14%. Dear God. Yeah. All hell might break loose,
And I guess one thing that I was kind of thinking about with that is that we had talked several years ago about Ohio and how Ohio's ABV cap was at 12%. And I think the reason why they really started talking about raising it was because there were certain breweries that were looking to move their production into the state, but decided not to because they couldn't brew over 12%. I think it was Evil Twin out of New York that was trying to do that. And I mean, even with well, I don't refer to them by their usual name, but I tend to call them Charlotte Street, which is where their brewery is located. That is known as Founders. But they had their own version of KBS for Ohio because of their ABV going too high, going over the cap, and they would brew a specific version for Ohio it would be like at about 11.9. But I guess I'm wondering for you guys, when it comes to that cap, obviously if it's around 14.1, 14.2, yeah, that sucks with having having that beer in there. But I guess from your perspective, does it really stop a lot of potential growth in the beer sector in Georgia by having that cap?
Not really.
I don't think it does. I think it's more the consumer desire than anything. Brewers are like, I'm good. And, there's some people that would brew stronger if it was available. We've got bigger fish to fry. We've talked to our guild, and some of the lawmakers here about the consumer's desire for a higher ABV. And basically the response has been, we understand, but it's not time to fight that battle right now, basically, that there's other things that they want to accomplish. So I don't think it limits, what we can do here. Like Brian mentioned, Avery has some fantastic beers at 17, 18%, 16, 17, 18 that I would love to get on the shelves here that we don't. But here in the state, I think we make the most of what we do have available to us.
Well, I mean, at some point, like, you're just getting to just be straight more alcohol as opposed to beer flavored beer itself. Unless you're craftily making it like the brewery, and I'm going to be honest, not every brewery can make it as well crafted as the brewery does when they get their high ABV beers. But even looking at the top rated beers on like Beer Advocate, there are a handful of like top beers. Like it looks like there's a Three Floyds 15%er out there. There's a J. Wakefield 17%er. There's still so many beers at 14% that you can really manage everything without necessarily having to worry about going too hard or, worrying about beer coming into the state. Like, you just don't get it. But do you guys have access to Tavour or all those other mail order
No, we can't. We're not allowed. We can't handle that kind of responsibility here in Georgia.
I thought we had the delivery options now. I think that is
No,
now.
sir. We have delivery like through DoorDash, and that Tavor is like an online ordering that would be shipped.
Oh, okay. I hadn't tried that one. I know that there were options. Okay, so
yeah, we can now get out. Thank you, Corona pandemic, because we can now get through like DoorDash and Instacart, we can have alcohol delivered that way.
Did you guys let's talk a little bit about your Georgia brewing during Corona. Like, what changes had to get made during out there? Did you guys have a lot of restrictions or anything like that hindered the breweries or even helped the breweries by law changes?
I'll tell you what, I've been talking a lot, Brian, but I'll make a quick comment and then turn this over to you. I promise that I think that part of the popularity of growth of Pilsner today is thanks to people having more time to use up those tanks for lagering when Corona hit. So that's my theory. And so seeing the growth, I know here in Georgia, we're seeing a lot of that, but there are some changes, but we're in Georgia and our governor was pretty much, wanted to open the doors as soon as possible. So
we weren't shut down for very long. And we definitely anecdotally know that several brewers were talking about how they did in fact use their tanks to do some prolonged lagering that would not have been possible otherwise. So yes, I think that definitely helped things along. We were already moving in that direction. We already have a number of breweries specializing in lagers of all varieties and doing gangbuster business doing that. So this helped that along. And I think that made adjustments in the economy and the way people thought about things, and people were suddenly more interested in lighter beers. So it came the ability to lager longer without the all the normal demand and the increased consciousness of health kind of brought people towards some of those lighter drinking beers. And they're great. I mean, there's a little bit of fatigue with all of your heavy hazies and your milkshake IPAs and what have you. So a lot of people are looking at these things now and saying, hey, I remember when beer used to taste like beer. So I kind of miss that. I want to go back to that. I don't think, aside from maybe like the ability to get some delivery alcohol, I don't think we had any, I'm not thinking of any like permanent legislative changes that came out as a result of that. I think we had some people being able to sell beers to go, like because they were suffering, beer bars that sold food and beer to go, and you could start doing that. And I think that's about it.
In Michigan, we had the ability to sell beers to go, but they also allowed for spirits to go and like cocktails to go. So within Michigan, we were locked down a little bit harder to the point where I think January 2021, we had outdoor only seating. And I know you guys are in Georgia, but in Michigan in January, not very warm.
Hey, we had igloos.
So there were a lot of ways people kind of got around the rules and restrictions. But for us, it allowed us to bring in social districts, which allow now you can hop from brewery to brewery, from bar to bar in certain cities without having to chug your drink before you go. You could just pour it into a plastic glass and walk out the front door. No big deal. So we were grateful for a lot of these different law changes. We too cannot get beer delivered through Tavor, but breweries are now allowed to start delivering beer, which was a huge benefit for a lot of people as they started like creating like territories so that you could just go, all right, and Monday I'm going to be in Kalamazoo, Tuesday Grand Rapids, Wednesday Traverse City, so that you can get your beer delivery every single day of the week. But we talked about lagers, and I want to kind of get your guys' thoughts. What are some more underappreciated beer styles you wish breweries kind of went into a little bit more?
I want saisons to be cool again.
Oh,
that's bring back more, the farmhouse ales in general. Table beers.
Brett beers.
Table beers. Brett. Bring back Brett. Yeah.
Brett could be with saison or it could be on its own. I wouldn't mind seeing more red ales. I'm trying to think that there's a list of them that is escaping me right now, but I've opened a few older Brett beers recently and thought, wow, these are marvelous. What happened? This was such a big thing, and now it's gone,
What about you, Dan?
ESBs. There's definitely not enough of those out there to get your hands on. The only one I can think of nationally, maybe two of them, is Red Hook and Trooper. Outside of that, we could use a lot more out there, I think.
God, I should have got a can of Trooper for this show. What about you, Rob?
I am barley wine all the time, man. And I need to see more of those.
You just want more barley wine all the time.
I just want more barley wine.
We're blessed here in Michigan, guys. We have so many saisons that it is ridiculous between Jolly Pumpkin and Barrel and Beam, and I think Transient makes a bunch. Speciation makes a bunch. Sorry, I keep talking. Brian, what's up?
Wheat wines. He said barley wines, and I immediately remembered wheat wine is one that I very much loved. And Boulevard did Harvest Dance, and I'm still fixated on that beer and would like for it or beers like it to come back. The wheat wine. We need more of those. They need to reappear and become a thing again.
Does I know Terrapin had one. Does Terrapin still make one down there or no?
No, I think that was called Gamma Ray. I don't know why I recall it, but yeah, I think it was Gamma Ray.
Every now and then they kind of bring those back for a one more shot tour, but I don't recall seeing that one recently.
Yeah, in Michigan, I don't recall. I know our Shorts' anniversary ale is a wheat wine, and I think Griffin Claw's Oblivious is a wheat wine. So we have a few here in Michigan, but they're all seasonal if they get made. Like that's both caveats, as it's only for a limited time and it's only if they decide to make it for sure. But let's talk about Georgia, because I know Georgia had some interesting rules for brew houses. Are you guys able to go to a brewery now and not have to take a tour or something? Like I remember having to take a tour to be able to have a sample of a beer. Has the laws in Georgia changed since I've been there?
As of 2017, we can now do direct sales, and that was really a huge turning point. I think, Brian, 2016, about 45 breweries across the state, somewhere in there.
Something like that, yeah.
They passed that law that allowed direct-to-consumer sales from the brewery, and there was it was a rocky road getting there. They did this first thing where you could only get samples. Then they did tours and tastings with, quote, souvenir beers as part of your tour package. And that had a lot of headaches and political upheaval. And then we finally just got direct sales. So, you could go in and buy. We're limited to up to 288 ounces per day to go. So, we still can't get a keg at a brewery or anything like that. But we saw a big growth of smaller brewers because prior to that, you had to have a distributor. That's the only way you could do anything here. And to go back to your COVID question, the smaller breweries that had opened recently and really didn't do any packaging, that they were mainly made for on-site consumption, I think they're some of the ones that got hurt the worst with COVID, because consumers really, they did curbside pickup. They went and bought a lot of that increased, but the small brewers that couldn't do that kind of got hit. So, that's really direct sales now. We have great bottle releases at the brewery only. Brewers are doing smaller batches that didn't make financial sense for them to do before. So more creativity just made a massive difference in our beer scene here. And if you haven't been to Georgia since 2017 for beer, totally different story now. The last 5 years have been good to us.
Absolutely. And there's definitely some beers that I can't even imagine if they had to go into distribution. One, they wouldn't be made, but two, how expensive they would be, because at the brewery, we're looking at 500 ml or 375s in the $30 range. If I had to go through a distributor, if they had to take their cut, we're looking at a $40 or $50 or $60 bottle of beer. I'm like, there's just no way that would even be possible,
Yeah, it's actually definitely been a minute. I used to work for a point of sale company for restaurants, and I was up in Hiawassee for work because I was working actually on the other side of Georgia and Tennessee. But people were telling me all these rules and regulations. The tap house that I was at, I don't know if they were ribbing me or not. Maybe they were getting rid of it, but there were no seats available at this local poorhouse. It was like a craft beer tasting room that focused more on growlers to go, but you could go and drink a pint, but you couldn't sit down. It was such a weird experience, to say the least. But again, they might have been just ribbing me.
Yeah. Or, we do have some counties and cities here that have strange laws. So maybe it was them mountain folk in North Georgia, I don't know about them. They're a little different. So, it could have been something going on up there.
So when you guys are traveling, you're getting out of the state of Georgia, you're sitting down at a brewery. What is something important for this brewery to have when you go there? Is it a style of beer, the plethora of styles? Is it something like games? Is it entertainment? Like, what's something that is very important for you when you walk into a brewery to have? We'll start with Brian here because Tim, you talk too much.
Yeah,
I do.
He really does.
Yeah.
A well-made IPA is usually, if I'm walking into a place, that's usually what I'm after. I'm very much still an IPA whore, basically. But well-made beer is the most important thing, and I know that I don't always go that route. I've tried to make myself go that route. You find the lager if they've got one on there to get as a barometer for what kind of quality you're in for, because if that lager tastes like hot garbage, they may have other beers that are good, but they're only good because they've layered things on top of them. So a well-made light beer is very, very much called for, and very much something I'd like. A well-made IPA is kind of what I'm looking for. Don't care so much about the entertainments. I find beer entertaining enough, and I'll sit at the bar if it's just me, and I will strike up conversations with people. So not a big deal. If they're going to have a band, very important, good acoustics. I cannot tell you how much I hate a tap room with horrible echoey acoustics and a guy just jamming like some cover version of a Sex Pistols song. And I'm like, nobody needs to hear this. It's just an assault on everybody's eardrums. Good acoustics if you're going to have live music. I think that covers it for me.
Before we go with you, Tim, I want to bring it to Dan, because Dan, obviously you're out in Arizona, and you were experiencing going to breweries here in Michigan when you moved to Arizona. Has anything changed in your mindset of what you expect when you go into a brewery, or, what are you looking for these days?
And I'll tell you, I wish there were breweries out here that had music, because I can only think of one off the top of my head in at least the greater Phoenix area that routinely has music. Other than that, main thing I'm looking for is style of beer. I want a stout. I want something that's not an IPA, kind of to switch up the other answer there, but don't have 9 IPAs, a lager, and a pale on tap. Give me some variety. Give me a brown. We talked about this, I think, last week, a red, a stout, anything that just has a little bit of variety, because not everyone's an IPA drinker. Not everyone's a lager drinker. So have something that's going to have a little bit different of flavor, and then I'll probably be walking in the door.
Yeah, I already got
how are you going
on the internet for saying that.
Yeah.
I was going to say, how are you going to have a stout out in Phoenix? You basically every day it's 100 and death.
I mean, a lot of people make stouts here. I mean, I go to a place pretty popular, has a Russian Imperial and a barley wine on tap pretty much all the time. But unfortunately, there's a lot of breweries that don't. There's one that's been open about 6 months here that's like Saison sour. It's like, okay. And I won't be coming in your door until you change it up a little bit. Another one open, did the same thing. They had 4 IPAs on tap to start, and then they expanded it to 8 IPAs. People do drink other things. So I wish that got through to some brewers' mentalities, that not everyone just wants to taste Pine Sol, when they come into their brewery.
That Saison brewery for Brian over here?
It's called Roses by the Stairs.
There you go, Brian.
Yeah.
When you go to Phoenix, you're going to have to remember that.
I've been to Phoenix, and I'm trying to think of the place that did all of the Saisons and wild ales that I really enjoyed. It was out a little on the outskirts. Arizona Wilderness.
Wilderness is another one that is very much like that. Yeah. They have a downtown version too. They'll have 27 beers on tap, and 26 of them will be Saisons or wild ales. You're absolutely right.
That sounds great.
That does sound great.
Yeah.
Does that sound better than, I don't know, like walking into, let's just say pretty much some place that's ran by Stone and it's 26 IPAs?
Yeah, in fact, I skipped the Stone Brewery when I went to San Diego about a month ago, because that's exactly what it was. I was hoping to find something different, something like a Woot Stout, but no, it was just all of their IPs, enjoy by, and it's just like 5 different dates.
Stone's the one that makes the Sosho Movo or whatever.
Xochimilco?
Yeah.
I was about to say Xochimilco, but I'm like, that's a Mexican restaurant here in Michigan. What about you, Tim? What are you looking for when you hit up a brewery?
So, I'll chime in real quick. I'm going to San Diego in 3 weeks, and my hotel is a half mile from Stone. So good advice there. I'll skip them probably. So, but my go-to, you know what? I think I like to go in and I want to see a Pilsner or something on the menu. A lot of times when I go in, so I don't have to overthink the menu, I'll just ask, hey, do you have a light lager or a Pilsner? Or start with that while I look for something else. And something that's really important to me, I want knowledgeable staff. I want you to be able to tell me about what's on your menu. Tell me about what you're serving. And we've got a beer bar here, Brick Store Pub, famous place, just celebrated, I think, their 25th anniversary it was. But every server in there, there's a passion about when they talk to you about a beer, they talk to you about the style, they can tell you the nuances. Now, I'm not saying every beer bar or every brewery has to have someone that's, just beer expert level, but know what you've got there. If I say, hey, I really like this and this, what do you have that's comparable? And you're like, I don't know, do you like IPAs? You shouldn't have anyone working in the brewery that says that. Other than that, I'm pretty adventurous. So if you've got a Pilsner and then a few other things, I'm good to go. I won't say proper glassware necessarily, but don't put everything in a shaker pint, and don't serve me in a solo cup. As long as you can play between those two lines, I'm probably going to be okay.
And it better be a beer clean glass too. If I'm at a brewery, it better be beer clean.
It better be.
One of the lures of this show, you're talking about a shaker pint. We went to a bar in Detroit called the Dirty Trick, and we were getting pints of Bourbon County.
Yeah.
Just like it was like only like $9 a pint too. Like,
hey Ken, was that for my birthday?
It might have been.
It was. It was.
All right, I was about to say, like, Dirty Trick. I think.
When else have you ever been in that bar? Like, ever?
There was a pizza place here in Atlanta it was a Jolly Pumpkin. I forget what something red Jolly Pumpkin, but they were doing like pints for like $7. And so
gosh,
I may have had a couple.
We exploited that for sure.
Yeah. There have been times where drafts have definitely been mislabeled. Like Hop Slam usually gets mislabeled here in Michigan, which is the Bell's Honey Triple IPA, which is a really solid beer. And you'll get to places where if they don't kick the keg, they'll start selling pints for like $3, and that's a 12 to 14% beer for sure.
Yeah,
Rob,
I've told us. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to ask Rob what he's looking for when he goes to a brewery these days.
I mean, it's kind of about the same of what Tim is looking for. I mean, I guess, and one thing that I always say to that, I judge Chinese restaurants by how well they do almond chicken, just as much as I judge breweries on how well they're going to do a Pilsner or a lager.
That's not Chinese food, Rob. I'm sorry. Got to interject.
No, it's not. It's not. We know this. We know. But I mean, it's just, that's, and that comes from actually a lot of the conversations we've had here. Especially when that's like one of my last questions I like to ask is that you judge a brewery by how well they make their what. And there's been so many people that day in and day out from interview to interview that they have said Pilsner or lager because you can't hide behind anything. And if that beer is good and solid, then you feel like you can trust everything else that they may have on the board. Now, for myself personally, I'm the one in the group that goes to a beer festival at 115 degrees, and the first beer that I grab is 12%. Because I want something that I want that high ABV because, well, one, I'm pretty sure it's going to be good. And two, I know it's going to be gone before I get a chance to come back to it. So I always go for the high ones. Don't shake your head, Nick. Shut up.
That's when Ken gets mad at us, too.
What do you mean, Sean? I didn't say nothing. Just shaking my head.
So, I'm looking for the beers that, that start with a simple style that you can't hide behind. And, I want people who are going to be knowledgeable. I want, just like at my stores, I want people at my stores who are going to be knowledgeable about a beer, because when I walk in, I may not know what the hell I'm looking for. But, I want somebody to say, hey, well, what's your favorite flavors? You know, what are things that you like? And just to be able to take that information and to come up with, you know, oh, here's a beer that will probably fit to your flavor profile. And just have knowledgeable people who know what the hell they're doing. That's huge. That's very huge. I mean,
well, that's kind of what Tim was saying for being at a brewery. Do you expect that when you guys, this is to the Beer Guys Radio, when you go to a bottle shop, like, do you expect it a little bit more when you go to an actual craft beer store, or is it kind of like the same, like you're kind of hoping for it, but you don't know?
I gauge it by the store that I'm going to. If I know it's a craft store, but you know, if I'm going to a Total Wine, I think they'll know a little bit, but probably not as much as my craft place.
About the same. Yeah. I will favor places where there's some knowledge, some idea of what's going on. If you ask for a fairly common beer and they have to go look in the system and have you spell it for them, I'm like, well, there's no help here. I need to look at the shelves quickly and get out, basically.
I always imagine craft beer snobs as the Ron Swanson meme when he walks into like a Home Depot and says, I know more than you. And just like continuously walks by. We're coming up on time. Beer Guys Radio. You guys are obviously syndicated. Give us a rundown. I'm a craft beer fan. I listen to Better on Draft. Why do you think I will like Beer Guys Radio?
Because we cover a lot of material. We talk about beer, but we start with beer and we start with interesting people and we go into a lot of interesting topics and a lot of what's in the news, a lot of things that you wouldn't even think of when you're thinking beer. It's connected to beer. So there's a lot of this world that is connected to beer, and it's all really enjoyable. I think we're fairly entertaining. So I think that even if you really didn't care that much about beer, I think you would find the show fairly entertaining on its own. I think Tim would agree with that, right?
Well said, Brian.
Yeah.
You may come in and hear a story about a horse drinking Mickey Big Mouse or the Great Plains pineapples of the American West.
Correct. You might hear these things.
So
I go to your.
So what episode was that?
The last 2 weeks, actually. Yeah.
All right, so let's date this. It's currently August 5th, 2022. So if you're looking for that episode, it's going to be in the last 2 weeks of that. But what about what's an episode I should listen to first?
Travis Rupp, the beer historian, beer archaeologist. We dive into several years, the different ages, ancient Egypt, Mayan civilizations, the history of beer and brewing, and the things they're still learning and developing. I think that was one of our best episodes. That's one of my personal favorites we've done. That's probably 2 or 3 years old at this point.
And I was kind of talking when you said the person's name, so I'll let you say it again.
Travis Rupp, RUPP.
Perfect.
And he's with Avery, the beer archaeologist with Avery.
Okay. What about you, Brian? What's your favorite episode?
That is probably going to be, I hate to say it, but I think that's the one. I mean, I did enjoy very much talking with not Bruce Watson, Bart Watson, right? I get the two confused.
Yeah,
Bart Watson of the Brewers Guild. Yep.
Yeah, that's a fun one. I really enjoyed that. The interesting thing, I mean, it is statistics and economics, so it might be a little dated. It's a few years old. A very enjoyable show. We've had a number of ones that I can't think of anyone's specifically off the top of my head that they just turned out to be great shows.
Shiner was
a great show. Yes,
really,
exactly.
Really fun interview. Yeah.
Wouldn't maybe have expected it. That was a blast. It was an absolute blast, and you just never know. And it really has to do with the people. I mean, honestly, the people we talk to are a big part of what the show's about, and that shouldn't be surprising. And so when you've got big characters like the Shiner people, you have a big show.
We're having great guests in common that were just awesome shows.
Yeah.
We actually, so we had Shiner on our episode 284, which you can go on to Spotify, YouTube. You also had Bart Watson on episode 261, YouTube, Facebook, Spotify, etc. that you can grab. Those great interviews by us. I will leave you guys the opportunity to promo and explain where people can find you, how they can find you, when your shows come out, all that fun stuff.
we're Beer Guys Radio on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So we're also at beerguysradio.com. We got lucky. Beer Guys Radio was available just about everywhere, so you can find us there. We are available on all of the popular and unpopular podcasting apps. And if you go to beerguysradio.com/listen, if you're a radio type, you can find us there on your local radio stations.
Or go to bgr.show.
Yes, easy one. The short URL.
That's going to do it for the Better on Draft podcast. Thank you so much for joining us from myself, Dan, Nick, and Robert. Welcome back, Robert. And whatever he's playing with, it looks like a little pupper on the video.
She's not little. She is a 75-pound pit bull mix that we just got a month ago.
As I said, little pupper. That's going to do it for Better on Draft. No matter what you think of your beer, we think it's Better on Draft. Have a good night.
Peace.